Okay, so in Figma, variables are used to store reusable values, just like this Jenga piece, which can be reused in a future game, except, you know, in Figma, you're dealing with colors or numbers that you'll be able to reuse in other parts of your design. And if your first question to this is variables, what variables? Then it's been a while since you opened Figma, because they recently announced this new feature at their annual conference. Of course, you might be watching this from the very distant future, where variables are like, duh, of course Figma has those, in which case, good for you, but for the rest of us mere mortals, they are still in beta at the time of this recording, and I'm here to show you everything you can do with them. I'll show you how to create and edit a variable. We'll talk about the available types. We'll cover collections and groups. We'll answer the burning question of, are variables and styles the same? And the answer is no, they're not. I'll show you how to create tokens and how to use them. I'll show you some cool keyboard shortcuts. We'll discuss about something very exciting called variable scoping. And finally, we'll get serious and work with variable modes, which are really, really cool. So cool, in fact, that Figma decided not to make them available for everyone, so you have to pay for that feature. But before we get into all that good stuff, my name is Adi, I'm a web designer, and I'm gonna start today's video with the sponsor of today's video, Envato Elements. Envato Elements offers all the creative digital assets you need under one subscription. Customize your project today by adding unique photos, fonts, graphics, and themes. For more information, check out the links in the video description. Alright, so let's get the ball rolling and discover what Figma variables are all about. So if you're coming from a development background, I'm sure you know what a variable is. Pretty much every programming language has this concept. Even CSS has variables, even though they're called custom properties. In simple terms, a variable is like a labeled container that holds different kinds of information you can use and change while working on something. And the main advantage of using variables is reusability. In this design, I'm using the same blue color in two places. If I want to change it, I need to do so 2 times for each element. Now, if I were to place the blue color code in a variable and use that instead, when it's time to change, I only do it once on the variable. This change will then propagate automatically to every single element that uses that variable. And now you might say, well, hold on there, cowboy. This sounds awfully familiar. This sounds like Figma styles. Does that mean that styles and variables are the same? The answer is no, they're not. This is a completely new feature. As I'm recording this in mid-2023, variables are still in beta. So what I'm showing you here might be a little bit different in the future. Now, Figma variables can be used for 3 things: design and design systems, advanced prototyping, and the Figma APIs. The APIs are used for plugins and widgets. The advanced prototyping is used for creating advanced prototypes, and design systems, well, that's what we're going to explore in this video. So let's get started by learning how to create and edit variables in Figma. If you want to follow along with this tutorial, there's a free Figma file that you can download from the community. That's linked in the video description, along with any other resource that I used. And hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more content like this. All right, let's get into it. So to get access to variables in Figma, you need to make sure you don't have anything selected. So for example, if you have this thing selected or anything else on your page, then you can just hit escape, or you can click outside right here on the infinite canvas. And you can find local variables on the right side in the inspector. Click that. And to create a variable, click this button. As you can see, we have 4 different variable types: color, number, string, and boolean. It's possible that in the future there will be more types, but when I'm recording this, these are the only ones available. So before we create any variables, let me show you what I have going on here as a demo. So this is just a simple homepage for a portfolio website. And as you can see, we have a couple of different colors that we're using here. So we have this one, like very dark gray, that I'm using for the headings. Yeah, I'm using it for this as well. I have a lighter text that's the same color but 50% in opacity that I'm using for, you know, kind of muted text, and also for the menus here, and also for this text right here. We have this kind of reddish orangey thing that I'm using for the buttons and maybe some links. And we also have some stuff here at the bottom, right? I have another link here. So currently these are not using any kind of style, right? As you can see under fill, it's just a hard-coded color value. So whenever it's time to change this, it can be a bit tricky. I could create a style for these, but variables are actually much more powerful. So let's actually go ahead and create a couple of variables for these colors that we're using for text, and this red color, this accent color. Okay, so we're gonna create variable. We're gonna choose color. We're gonna name it gray 100, meaning 100% opacity. And for the value here, I can just grab the color picker and sample that color. Cool. Let's create another one. So create variable, color again. Let's call it gray 50. And gray 50 is basically going to be the same as this one. So I can just copy it. And then I can open the picker and I can change the opacity to 50%. Or I can input a totally different value. It doesn't really matter, right? So let's see what else we have. We have these lines here. Let's see, they're using, yeah, the same color, but 20% opacity. Now here's something cool. When you have one of these variables selected, you can press Shift-Enter, and that will basically duplicate that variable. Pretty nice. So I can call this gray 20, and I can change its opacity to 20%. And I can just keep going until I get all the colors that I'm using in my page. What else? Let's grab this accent color, right? So we're going to create a new variable, color. We're going to call it accent, or maybe just orange 100, just so we can keep up with the same naming convention that we used on the top. Okay, so now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 variables created for the colors. If at any point I want to edit on these variables, I can double click either the color code or the opacity here, or its name, obviously, or I can click this where I can edit the name. I can add a description like how to use this variable. Okay, I can change the values like right here. And we also have a section for color scoping. Don't worry about this for now. I'll explain that in just a little bit. So now we have variables. Let's go ahead and apply them to our elements, right? So let's select this text. And here where it says fill, let's actually close this out. Instead of doing a custom fill, I can go to libraries and I can choose from the ones that I just created. So let's choose gray 100. So now you can see that that section changed. Of course, I can always detach the variable, and that's going to go back to what it had previously. Let's choose that again. What else? We have these, so let's do the same. Let's go to gray 100, and let's see what else. Let's do it for this as well. This one, let's replace it with gray 50, like so. This will also replace with gray 50, and this will replace with gray 20. This, where it says selection colors, orange 100. So now, here's why variables are so cool. If I decide, okay, maybe I want this text to be a different color, right? I can go into my local variables, and without even touching the text elements, I can go in here and I can say, okay, make this blue. And every single element that uses that variable will get the new color. Maybe I don't like this orange. Maybe I want some green. I can choose a green color, and every element that uses that used that orange is now using green. I can even rename this, right? Instead of orange, I can say green 100, and that doesn't matter because that element is now using green 100. I just changed the variable name, but the variable is still applied to the element, regardless of its name, which is pretty awesome. So in a nutshell, you know, that's how variables work. So let me actually undo these changes. Cool. And let's create another variable type. Let's create a string variable, because here's what happens. I have a tagline here that's called illustration is my passion, right? And I have it here in the hero area, and also right here in the footer. And since this is, you know, repeating, and I might want to change it a bit later, let's make it into a variable. So how do we do that? Open the variables again, create variable, choose string. Let's call it tagline. And a string value, I'm just going to copy that, paste it in, and then select the text that I want to use the variable. And in the inspector, I'm going to hover on this where it says apply variable, click, and I'm going to choose tagline. And I'm going to do the same here at the bottom. Select the text, apply variable, choose tagline. And now the cool part is I can change this to whatever I want. So now this changes and this changes. How awesome is that? What else? Let's create some number variables. Let's do some for, I don't know, spacing. Let's do 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's say I want to use these variables to set the spacing of my elements. And because I'm using an 8-point grid system, I'm going to use 1, 2, 3, and 4 as multipliers, and I'm going to multiply them by 8. So 0 times 8 is 0, 1 times 8 is 8. Yeah, that's going to be 16, 24, and 32. So check this out. I'm going to select this list of items, which is basically a frame with auto layout and has a distance between items, or a gap, of 16 pixels. So instead of using a hard-coded value, we can use a variable. So we're going to click here, apply variable. I'm going to choose number 2. And now, whenever I change the values from this, yeah, without it even being selected, it's going to change the spacing there. Awesome. Finally, let's create a Boolean value, right? So create variable, Boolean. Let's create one for this, this quote here. Let's say I want a variable that will allow me to quickly toggle the visibility of this quote, right? So let's call it quote visible, and this can be true or false. So how do we apply this? We select the quote, we scroll down to the layer, we go to the eye icon, we right click, and we select the variable. Okay, so now that's invisible. But if I go into my variables here and I turn this on, it makes it visible. Awesome. So these are the four variable types. We have color, we have string, we have number, and we have Boolean. But it's all kind of a big mix here, right? All the variables are just sitting here in one place. And one thing we can do with them is group them up. So here's how you do that. You open up the sidebar here. You can see a group called all variables. We have 11 of them. Okay, but I can select, for example, just the color variables, and I can right click, new group with selection. And we're going to call this group colors. Okay, and colors now only contains the stuff that I selected. And I can right click, I can ungroup, I can duplicate, I can delete that group. And I can, of course, double click to rename it. Let's do the same for this. New group with selection. Let's call it strings. Let's group these up. Let's call them numbers. You can call them whatever you want, obviously. And let's create another group with this one. Let's call them booleans. So now, every single one is nicely grouped up. Now we can take this one step further. See how these gray colors are very similar in the sense that they start with the word gray and then dash. These could be grouped up as well. But here's how you do that. You can rename these. Instead of saying gray dash 100, you can say gray slash or /100. Do the same for the rest. Okay, let's do the same for the orange. So now, yeah, we have two extra groups. We have the main group, which is colors, and then two subgroups, gray, which contains 100, 50, and 20, and then orange, which contains 100. And this will make it even easier for you to pick colors, because let's say you're selecting this this frame here. You go to the picker, you go to libraries, and now all of a sudden you have the group names on top. So they're displayed very nicely, very organized here in the picker. You can see, oh, okay, I want colors, orange. Yeah, let's go with 100. So the /, really important. Learn how to use this to create hierarchy within your variables. Now, by themselves, variables are very useful, but not very suitable for design systems. This is where you need to start using tokens. So, what is a token, you might ask? A token is basically a name used to express a design decision, like a color, a typeface, a font size, a dimension, and so on. For instance, when referring to the blue color of this button, instead of saying blue or 0079FF, which is its hex code, it's much better to say color primary or color background button. Because not everyone knows a color by its hex code, and this logic applies to all the other design decisions. Now, I won't expand on this any further because there are dedicated videos for design systems on the Envato Tuts Plus channel, links down below. Instead, I want to show you how to apply this token logic to the variables that we created earlier. So basically, I'm going to show you how to tokenize those variables. And the first thing you need to understand here is that there's no special token variable in Figma, right? We just create another variable which will be used as a token. So if we open up the variables, the one thing that I recommend you do is create a separate collection. Okay, and if you didn't notice this before, well, you're going to see it now. Right here on the top, we have access to collections, right? And by default, I'm using collection 1. And what I want to do here is actually rename this. I'm going to rename it to primitives because that's something I recommend you do when working with design systems. Primitives are basically the simplest building blocks of your design system. And then we're going to create another collection, and this one is going to be for tokens. And notice you can switch between these at any time. Okay, so let's see exactly what we need here. Let's take the first primitive color, right? The gray 100. This is being used in the headings mostly, right? It's also being used here in the text, but mostly it's being used in the headings. So let's go back to tokens, create a variable. We're going to create a color, and we're going to say color text. And now here's the cool part. Instead of typing the color value manually, we can go to libraries and we can pick that gray 100 primitive. So what we're doing basically is we're creating an alias for this gray 100 and we're calling it color text. Okay, so now we can select the home page and we can see that whenever we're using or wherever we're using colors gray 100, we can change that to the color text token. And let's do that here as well. We go to libraries and we go to tokens. See the collection name is displayed here as well, and we select color text. Right, so this is a much better approach. We can do the same for this kind of text, the muted, right? So I can again create a new variable. I can either shift enter to duplicate it, or I can create one from here. Let's call it color text muted. And here I can go and choose my primitive, colors gray 50, right? So now I can select this element, and instead of the primitive, I'm going to choose the token. And I'm going to do the same here. What about the red, right? Let's create a new variable. Color. Let's call it color accent. And here's what we can also do. We can right-click, we can create an alias, and that's going to take us directly to the picker, to the libraries. It's the same thing as doing this, but with create alias, it's just a little bit faster. So here, again, we can choose the accent color. Okay, so now I can once again go in here and choose or replace all the instances of this color with my token. And what's nice about the token approach is that I can, at any time, change the value of the token without actually changing the original primitives. So let's say that I want the color of the text to be the gray 50 instead of the gray 100. I just do one change and that gets applied to all the elements that were using that token. And I actually forgot to apply them here as well. There we go. Or I can go back to my original decision. And again, just like our initial collection, the primitives, in the tokens collection, we can create groups. I can group these up and I can call them colors. Or I can call them text colors or whatever, button colors. It's probably better to be a bit more specific with these. What else? Let's create another variable. Let's create some aliases or some tokens for the spacing values, right? So let's do spacing none. And here I'm going to create an alias and I'm going to choose my numbers. Numbers 0. Let's do a couple more. Spacing SM for small. I'm going to choose the number 1. Spacing medium. I'm going to choose number 2. Spacing large. Choose number 3. And spacing extra large. Choose number 4. Okay, let's select these. New group. Let's call this spacing. Okay, so now I can, let's go to, I don't know, this menu here, right? This menu has a gap between items of 32 pixels, right? So in here, I can apply a variable, And I don't want to worry about primitives. I don't want to use those. I want to use tokens. And I want to use the spacing tokens. So I have the name, the token name, and also the value that's going to get applied. So we're going to choose spacing extra large. And just like with the other tokens, if in the future I decide I want the spacing extra large to be, smaller, I can do that, no problem. Or bigger, or maybe I'm going to add yet another primitive here. Okay, let's actually duplicate this one. Let's say 5. 5 times 8, that's 40. Okay, so now I can go back to tokens and I can say, okay, the extra large spacing that I'm using is actually not large enough. So I'm going to use the next available size. Now, this would actually be a good time to explain the differences between variables and styles a bit more in depth, right? Because at the surface, they're both doing similar tasks, right? They allow us to reuse values. But the thing with styles is the following. A style cannot reference another style. So that's the downside, right? So for example, let's say I'm going to select this image and I'm going to add like a drop shadow to it, okay? What I can do is I can go in here and I can create a style, right? I'm going to call it IMG shadow. And that's all it is. It's a style. It's a standalone thing, right? It cannot reference other styles. Variables, on the other hand, as you saw, can reference other variables. So if we look at the tokens, the color text variable references colors/gray/100. So that's super, super powerful. On the other hand, variables can only store single values, right? So if we go back to primitives, they can only store like a color or a string or a number or a Boolean value. Styles, on the other hand, can store sets of values. Like, for example, this image shadow style that I created, well, it stores a set of values. It stores the X, the Y, the blur, the spread, the color opacity, right? So it's much more complex in this regard. This can also store, gradients and stuff like that. So variables and styles, yes, they are similar in some regards, but at the same time, completely different. Variables should be used for one thing, styles should be used for something else entirely. Now, before we wrap up this section of the video, let me quickly explain that very exciting thing I told you about in the intro video, which is variable scoping. So if we go to our variables here, and I showed you this previously, if we go to the colors or the numbers and we click on this icon where it says edit variable, we can see color scoping and number scoping. Strings and booleans don't have scoping. So what is this for, basically? Scoping refers to the places where that variable is accessible or the items it's accessible to. So for example, this color gray 100, okay, I can choose where to make it available. Should I make it available for the stroke or the fill or in all supported properties? Let's say I want to only make this available for the fill. Okay, so remember colors gray 100. So now let's let's create like a rectangle here. And let's go to fill. Let's go to libraries, and you can see on the primitives color gray 100 is available, so I can use that. But if I go to stroke and I go into libraries, gray 100 is not available because in my variables, I set it to only be available for the fill. If I check these back and I do the same thing, if I go back here now it's going to be available for the stroke as well. And the same goes for the numbers, right? If we go to the numbers here that we used for spacing, basically, right? I don't want to have these available for corner radius or width and height or text content. I only want them for the gap, for the auto layout. So now you'll notice that the primitives are not available for the width, only the tokens are, but the primitives are available for the gap property, right? You can see here I have access to the primitives and also the tokens. But if I don't want the tokens to be available, well, that's also easy to do. I can go in here and I can uncheck all my tokens. So now, if I go to the width property, yeah, I actually don't have any kind of variable that I can apply because I unchecked or I modified the scoping of those variables just now. So that's what variable scoping is basically. It allows you to determine where you want certain variables to be selectable and on which properties. And this prevents you from, or it allows you to basically be a bit more organized. Because, for example, if you have certain variables that are being used just for border radius, you don't want them showing up, when you're selecting the gap. That's just gonna overcrowd your list here. That's gonna make it a little bit more difficult for you to work. So I really like variables in Figma. If used properly, they have the potential of saving a lot of time, and I'm actually looking forward to using them in my future projects. With that said, there is one last thing on the agenda, and that's actually the coolest of the bunch. It's called variable modes. And I left this for last because, unfortunately, it's a paid feature. According to the official website, you need one of these 4 plans to use variable modes. And the number of modes you can create per a variable collection hinges on your plan type. Now, a variable mode allows your design to change when used in different contexts. And one of the easiest examples I can give you is light and dark mode. So let me show you a quick example of that. First of all, if you want to try this yourself, make sure your file is in a team that's on a paid plan. I'm using a professional plan, so this is going to work for me, no problem. What you do is you go to local variables, okay, and you can go to tokens, or you can even go to primitives, but I recommend you use tokens here. And right here we can see 2 columns, right? Name and value, but we also have a plus sign where it says new variable mode. So when you click that, the second column changes to mode 1. Third column is mode 2. And you can rename this. Let's call this light mode. Let's call this dark mode. Okay, so now here's what you do. You can select your main frame, and right here where it says layer, you can click change a variable mode. And you can go to tokens or wherever you applied the new mode, and you can switch between light mode and dark mode. We'll talk about auto in just a little bit. So if we go to dark mode, you'll see that nothing happens. And in dark mode, this frame that you selected uses these variables. And of course, they're the same as the light mode. But as soon as we start making changes, for example, color surface main, which is the background of my image, if I change this from white to black, and then I change the color of the text from this one to, let's keep it simple, let's change it to white. And also change the muted text to also to white. The orange is going to stay the same. The color of the lines, let's also change it to white. Just so we can show a quick example, right? This will now have a dark mode, and you can always go in and change between light mode and dark mode. How cool is that? So in light mode, the frame will use the variables from the first column. Yeah? In dark mode, it's going to use the variables from the second column. So what does auto do? Well, auto will actually look at the mode of the parent element. So if I were to have, let's actually close this. If I had another frame here and another frame, yeah, and I were to drag my initial frame in here, and I go to this frame, and I can choose the dark mode to light, this one, because it's set to auto, it's gonna get the mode of its parent. But now if I move this to this other frame, and I set its mode to dark, this one being in auto, it's gonna get the mode from its parent. And here's the nice part. I can move them. I can move this frame, which is set to auto, between light and dark. And if the parent doesn't have a mode selected, then auto, the one that I have here, will actually default back to the very first column, which in our case is light mode. And of course, variable modes can be used in lots of different ways. Light mode, dark mode, that's just the most basic example I can give you, but you can do a lot more. For example, you might have modes here for, large screens, small screens, medium screens, in which case you might want to change the spacing, right? On large screens, spacing SM might be a certain value, but on large screens or a different size screen, spacing SM might be something totally different, right? So you can use this to help you design responsive pages. Another example that I really like is using variable modes for translation, right? So let me get rid of these. So for translation, here's what you can do. Okay, you go to your variables, and let's go to our primitives, and let's go to our strings, right? And let's create, we have one string for the tagline here, but also let's create another one for this bit, right? So create a variable, string. This is what? Description? Let's just call it description. And I'm going to paste in that value. And then I'm going to select this element. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to select the description. So now what I can do is I can create a new mode, and I can call this EN for English, and I can call this RO for Romanian. And I can translate this to Romanian, and I can translate this to Romanian as well. Something like that. Okay, so now I can select, just this frame, just the hero frame, and I can go to primitives, and I can go, okay, I have the English, which is auto, but I want the Romanian. Or I can go back to English, or back to Romanian, or whatever language you're using. And the examples can go on and on. You can get as creative as you want with variable modes. All right, so in this video, you learned about working with variables in Figma. And a variable is like a labeled container that holds a piece of information you can use and change whenever you like. The main advantage of using variables is reusability. This saves time and makes projects easier to maintain. In Figma, variables are not the same as styles. The main difference is that a variable can reference another variable. There are currently 4 available variable types: color, number, string, and boolean. Regardless of the type you're creating, it's always a good idea to group variables. Using the / in the group name will allow you to further categorize your variables. Speaking of categories, variables can also be placed in collections. These sit at the very top of the structure, and they're great for separating primitives from tokens, for example. Tokens are names used to express design decisions. For example, instead of using a hard-coded color variable, which holds no meaning, use a name like color accent or color primary. Finally, if you want to change your design automatically in different contexts, you can use something called variable modes. For example, this works great for changing the color palette between light and dark. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. What do you think about Figma variables? Let us know down in the comments. As always, don't forget to check out the Envato Tuts Plus YouTube channel for more content like this, but also to learn about web design, web development, and much more. It's all free, so make sure to also hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. I'm Adi. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, take care.